Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this Tantra Talks podcast, where we seek to shed light on the meaning of Tantra. There's often a lot of misconception and misunderstanding about the word and the meaning of Tantra. And so it's my intention with this podcast to help to understand and make it a little bit more clear. So I thought I'd invite different practitioners of Tantra onto the show. And so I'm very happy to introduce Roisin Kiernan. So welcome to the show, Roisin.
Yeah, hello.
How are you doing today?
Good. Very, like I said, very just reflective.
Reflective, considering the time that we're in with the coronavirus and everything that's happening on the planet, obviously with the riots in America just kind of going on. How are you feeling about all of this and this whole process, the 2020 process?
I think 2020 kind of says it all, you know, like 2020 vision, but process of correcting our eyes.
Yeah.
We're in a process of correcting our vision, and we've spent a long time looking externally, and maybe it's time now to look within.
Internalizing our focus.
Yeah, when I hear 2020, it makes me think of vision, you know, and actually I think it's apt. But also the numerology behind it, it's a 4, you know, it's which in tantric numerology is it's a neutral mind, and really this is this place of being responsive, you know, weighing up the pros and cons instead of reacting, which comes from a triggered place often. Sort of inner vision, watching to where we're being triggered, looking within and choosing to respond from the heart. You know, number 4 is the heart chakra.
Excellent.
To conclude on your question, I feel optimistic whilst we're in a time of great change, moving from this Kali Yuga, the dark ages, into this new age, the Aquarian age. And I know that everybody who is on the planet at this time was meant to be here, chose to be here, and we all have a part to play, whether big or small. So 20 is a time for greater vision.
Greater vision. Excellent. That's awesome. Like how you described that. And then from that clarity, then choosing to act, you know, when you have that kind of more heart-centered connection, and then you can act with clarity instead of, again, in that reactionary state. So, Roisin, could you tell the audience what it is that you do as a practitioner of Tantra, or however you choose to describe yourself in the work that you do?
So I'm very keen on words, and so I like to play around with ideas and themes and the way things are questioned. You know, I think that communication is really important. And you asked me about what I do as a practitioner of Tantra. So in terms of what I do is, as a practitioner, is I explore energy, I suppose, and I look at every area in my life where I can be more expansive and more in a place of love, in a nutshell. And that can take many different forms. That might be, you know, sacred activism, the work that I do. It might be in my relationships. It might be how I relate to my food, or how I might decorate an altar, or how I care for my home or other people, how I choose to see the world, you know, whether from an optimistic, from an expansive place, from a place of love, or from a place of fear, from a contracted place. So as a practitioner of Tantra, I wouldn't say I do, I choose to see how I can be more expansive.
Excellent. And how would you define Tantra? Because it seems that you're touching maybe on the definition or the meaning of Tantra through that description. So in terms of the word, again, people can misconceive Tantra that it's all to do with sex, or certainly in India, everyone thinks it's just like black magic. How do you understand Tantra as a path and as a term when you refer to Tantra? What do you mean, or how do you understand the word?
Tantra, like any other practice, is a package that other people have created for us to support our evolution, our expansion. In terms of the root of the word, I understand it to mean a form of weaving. So it's like sewing all the parts back together, all the parts that have been kind of disconnected. You might call them soul pieces, you might call them jigsaw pieces, like bringing it all together rather than this separation. So it's like collapsing the polarities of male and female, of black and white, of night and day, and seeing it all as one. It's unifying and expansive in that way.
Unifying and expanding into, and if we look at Tantra again, the tra part also relates to the word transcendent. So I guess it's that, maybe what you're referring to is that unification of polarities within and externally to then sort of transcend physical reality and to go into these higher states. Would you resonate with that?
I hear what you're saying, and there's a danger, I feel, in the transcendent aspect, because actually on Earth I don't feel we're there yet. The ultimate aim might be to transcend the physical, or transcend the desires and the animalistic aspects of being an animal, however we are on this earth. If you look at in Khajuraho, which is said to be one of the birthplaces of Tantra, it's where the images of the Kama Sutra, which is a very base understanding of Tantra or of sex, it's like carved into those temples. And these are like, I think from the 16th century, so elaborate. The different layers that we can go through in order to transcend, with the ultimate being like almost like a Buddha's head on the top. But going through these layers, and it's like piles, or you might say like chakras, or, you know, different steps, are the journeys we must take, or the steps we must transcend, if you want to use that word, in order to reach a transcendent state. And these include like moving past, moving through, not past, moving through all our desires, which means going through the body. And it can include, in these images that are carved into stone, there's like bestiality, there's orgies, there's everything going on, which is like such a feast for the eye, that it can be used in the Kama Sutra. However, the philosophical or the ultimate aim is to move, is to evolve, you know? But really, in order to get there, we have to go through.
Yeah. Embracing physicality, embracing the body, embracing pleasures, desires, instead of denying that aspect.
Exactly. And this is the idea of the expansion. It's like watching ourselves, and even if those feelings or thoughts or desires may be considered in our society as unhealthy or negative, it's not putting those connotations on them, it's accepting. you know, and this is where we move away from shadow. And there's a lot of the problems that we have in relationships, in society, in use of control with sexuality, comes from there being such fear, shame, and guilt surrounding the exploration of our desire.
Yes, exactly. And then we start to deny, and we resist, and we suppress those natural urges, and then that's how sort of shadow starts to build and to grow, and it starts to enter into perverted expressions and forms of a very natural impulse. I think Tantra seeks to bring these natural desires and make them sacred, whether it be sex or eating food, just very sort of or drinking alcohol. You know, these things are accepted in certain traditions of Tantra, but done with a sacred attitude that, you know, to respect and to honor the process, all as means of kind of entering into the physical to ultimately go beyond the physical, or to make the physical sacred, to then, you know, to go beyond the desires and the more shadow aspects of these impulses.
Yeah, and you know, in terms of sacred, what constitutes something as sacred? It's a wonderful word, and I feel again it has that sort of transcendent quality, like it's better than. Oh, my screen changed then. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, like to set a table and make a beautiful vegan meal could be considered sacred, but in some other forms, to hunt with your bare hands and with your mouth, eat a wild animal could be considered sacred. In the same way that you might set a place for sacred lovemaking, with flowers and petals and incense, and use the breath and meditate. Same way as a good fuck can be like sacred. You know, it's not bypassing. It's remembering that all is sacred, all life. And this is really this what we were talking about. About this expansive nature and this acceptance of desire, of all our urges, in order to move through.
Would you say it's the intention moving into these things that differentiates it, as bringing conscious awareness into everything that you're doing, that kind of makes it different from being something that's purely based in unawareness, in shadow, in pure desire, maybe some negative expressions of anger, aggression, need, attachment? Would you say that you can, you know, it's embracing all of life, but it's more about the attitude that you go into the practice that can essentially make it tantric?
Yeah, there are, I'm thinking of two facilitators in our world. One, and it's a great phrase, depending on how you look at it, is to stay alert, you know, in everything that we do. And the other one comes from one of my mentors, Kamala Lyra, who is a direct student of Osho's back in the day. And you know, if you want to look into, and there's much written and talked about him, if you want to look into really going through his teachings, especially in the early days, were pretty out there. But she said one thing that has always stuck with me, and it was, it's not about what you do, it's why you do it. That's that awareness. So it's not about, you know, people say, drinking alcohol or eating meat is bad, and it's moving away from this idea of good or bad. It's the awareness that you bring to it is why. You know, if you're drinking to escape, if you're drinking because you don't like your life, then that has repercussions on you, because you're suppressing. If you're meeting and it's like a glass of wine, and sat nam. Like, there's so, like, you could argue the scientific reasoning behind it, but on an energetic level, the frequency is clear.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Awesome. And then again, it's expressing those desires. If you have the desire, don't deny it. You know, as long as you're coming from a place, not coming from a place of escapism or need, but it's just that natural expression of who you are. And it's in that moment, it's appropriate for you to do that and having that awareness. So you mentioned also about the polarity, the masculine and the feminine. Obviously, this is a major part of Tantra, and looking to embrace these energies and to unite these energies. Certainly, and from a philosophical point of view, you have the Shiva principle, the masculine, which is spirit, consciousness, and then you have the Shakti, the feminine principle, energy, manifestation, creation, and how these two aspects of Mother, Father, God interact and create reality. And that leads to the third principle, the divine child, individuated consciousness. So when working with the masculine and feminine principles, whether it be on a broader metaphysical level or on an interpersonal, individual experience of different energies within, how do you understand these two fundamental energies and how they work individually and together?
Okay. So the way I facilitate is not to tell somebody how it is for them. I choose to try and empower people to find their own way. However, there are underlying principles that are talked about. Shiva being the more holding force, the masculine being the holding force, the all-pervading consciousness. And then the different sides of the brain, the left side being the masculine, the more logical structure and so on. And then Shakti, the feminine, being the creative principle, movement. So you have the holding force of consciousness, of structure, and then around that creativity and flow. And both are necessary. Just as the two sides of the brain need to work together, or can work together, so too can we utilize this understanding to be more productive and more fulfilled in our lives. And that can come from a more mental perspective and how we choose to utilize our time, but then also on a relational level with ourselves and an understanding of our needs in each moment. So for me, my daily practice really is to check in with my own masculine and feminine and their needs and how they can support each other to support me. And then moving into a relational sense, like when I'm in a relationship, like with my partner, I see it as like there are four beings in the relationship, or four aspects. There's my own masculine and feminine, his masculine and feminine. And then, you know, we can take this to a broader sense in the world at large. I feel like we've been in a patriarchal, a heavily masculine dominant society where the feminine, if you look at the feminine, our own free thinking, creative way of being, and as part of that feeling has been suppressed for a more structured, logical way of being controlled, you could say. And so the masculine, we're out of balance on a much larger scale, which impacts on a personal scale. So the way I work, and certainly I call it it's like spiritual activism, is actually, and the focus at the moment, we were talking about this a bit before, my focus at the moment is with women. And that has been because if women, and this is often the case, if women find it difficult to connect with their own inner feminine, imagine how hard it must be for men. is what I often say, you know. And for women, if we can drop in and be the change, and many other spiritual teachers have told about this, that I mean, the Dalai Lama, the Western woman will save the world or whatever. I don't see it as women, actually. I see it as the feminine uprising or descending, however you want to look at it. But if we can get in touch with our own feminine and feel and inspire and meet men from that place and raise children from that place, then slowly the world can change. You know, for men, and there are groups happening and it's wonderful, but for men I find it's a little bit more difficult to drop immediately into the feminine. So I work with women for that reason. And also there's a feeling of more safety when you're in a same-sex group to explore sexuality and to get more intimate. And then from that place, it for many people, it's easier then to move into mixed groups.
Awesome. So you brought up some really interesting points there. Like the first one, you mentioned about how you check in with your own masculine and feminine on a daily basis as a daily practice. So I'm curious to know how you do that. I think it would be something the viewers also would benefit. I like maybe it's a little practice. How do you do that? I mean, what does that kind of involve, and you know, what kind of process do you go through?
So it can take a few different forms. My approach currently, and it's constantly changing, is to hold my yoni, to listen to my yoni, to listen to my body, really, and listen to what she needs and what she wants. And there's been a shift in me recently, where actually my feminine is I want to use the word leading, although it doesn't seem the right word, but yeah, he's supporting her, let's put it that way, rather than for a lot of my life, having left home early and having to feel like I have to be tough in the world. The women I know feel this way in order to succeed externally, will become very masculine, very quite armored, if you like. So to drop into my feminine was a little scary, and it's taken a lot of work to feel comfortable to drop fully into feeling. As women especially, we feel a lot. You know, we're designed to be ever changing emotionally. And so to really go into that can be scary. And there's been a change, like they're working together a lot more.
How do you define feminine? That's a difficult
Sorry?
one. How would you define femininity, or to be feminine, or to connect with one's feminine energy? I mean, you talked about feeling and creation.
Yeah, so if the feminine principle, Shakti, is creativity, is movement, ultimately it's emotion. It's what's moving, and that is feeling. Yeah, and so if I can get in touch with my feelings, then I know to move from that place. And actually, we live in such a culture of doing and then resting and then being, because the masculine has come first for so long. It feels like the more normal way. But actually, now that I'm dropping into it, and it's taken years of practice, to come and meet the world from a place of being is more honoring and more serving of myself. You know, like people talk about meditating every day and doing their yoga every day. Ultimately, that can be a form of finding doing to find the being to then do. You know what I mean? Yeah. And if I can tune into myself and feel, what do I need right now?
So you might just be lying in your bed first thing in the morning and you're just connecting, internalizing, connecting with how you're feeling, literally bringing your awareness into the sacral chakra, into the yoni area, connecting to the feelings in the body and asking kind of what it is that I need in this moment, what it is that I need in this day to feel nourished and nurtured, to act.
Totally. And then he can serve her. You know, then the doing comes through. If the feminine is the more receptive, if you look at yin and yang, yin is the rest. It's like, if you look at the symbol of yin and yang, it's the darkness, it's the moon, it's the downtime, you know? And then the yang, the masculine principle, is the doing. So from that place of being and deep listening, then what do I need? And then doing. And as a woman, especially because our monthly cycle changes, there are times where actually my energy is low. And the best way I can serve myself is simply to rest. Although it feels still controversial.
But maybe the guilt about, I guess you're connecting with yourself and then you're deciding how it is I want to act, embrace the masculine to act in that moment or in that day based on the information you're receiving from your feelings, from your emotions. And again, I think you bring up a really good point that a lot of people, and I don't know if it's the older generation or, you know, our generation, feel guilt in resting, in self-nurturing. And it's finding that balance where you are resting and honoring that time of self-nurturing, yet not being lazy with it or not procrastinating and not, you know, just bossing around, and being able to embrace the masculine at the appropriate time. And I guess you need the self-awareness to constantly just be checking in with yourself. Okay, I'm ready now to act and to embrace that masculine expression. So in terms of you said that sometimes there's some conflict, or you feel that, do you think that's a guilt thing, a program that we've inherited, that a lot of us have inherited, about the guilt behind not acting and resting and nurturing, self-nurturing?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we live in a world, especially in England, you know, where success is measured by your certificates and your bank balance and the size of your house, you know.
Very masculine attributes. And it's not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but when everything is targeted and focused on the external achievements, then, you know, people are emotionally bankrupt. And certainly as a yoga practitioner, you see, you know, especially sort of middle-aged guys who have spent their whole life dedicated to work and external achievement, and they come to class and, you know, they're stiff as, you know, two boards, they can barely move. It's almost like their life has just been a sacrifice to create externally, to manifest externally, and there's been no self-connection, no self-awareness, no self-nurturing, self-honoring. And I guess that's what you're talking about when referring to that this planet is still in that patriarchal, masculine domination, in a sense, or that's a dominant form of energy. And the work that you're doing with women and with yourself is helping women to connect back to their own feminine energy and to empower that feminine energy to ultimately help empower the feminine energy on the planet. So collectively, we are more in touch with the self-nurture, the feeling, the emotion, the heart, receptivity, spirituality, as opposed to be so always focused on external achievement, money, house, etc.
Yeah, totally. And the externalization can happen with the masculine, and I'm sure, like with men and the feminine, it does, you know. We're externalizing our own lack of presence, expecting another man or an expression of the masculine to support us in some way, you know. Or for men, a lot of men expecting the feminine to be the nurturer of them, if you like. It's almost like we're projecting our mother-father wounds on each other, you know. And it's like when we can come back and like go, okay, I'm projecting my own shit on somebody else. Like, instead of externalizing, go within and see what is going on there. What can I learn from the situation? Like, turn the mirror back to oneself. And talking about people who work and it's striving for external financial gain. I talk a lot about abundance and I mentioned at the beginning how I like to play with words and look at words, and words are again, to me, quite a masculine construct. And really, I want to be clear here, when I'm talking about masculine and feminine, I'm not talking about men and women. It's not a gender divide. That's how we have been divided as a species and as in ourselves. That's how often part of the division comes from this divide of men and women. Divide and conquer, it's age-old tactic. But the more we can bring our own masculine and feminine together in a dance, then we get abundance, really. So there's a few things, I think, this intimacy with the self then gets reflected in our intimacy with others. So I've been listening to a book on leadership by Brené Brown, who's a key sort of vulnerability worker and advocate. And one of the studies she explained about was how people were more productive when they felt more emotionally fulfilled. And if we're externalizing our emotional needs with another, and of course we need contact, contact is great, but when we can emotionally fulfill ourselves, then we are more productive. There have been studies shown to prove this. So for me, if the masculine is the doing principle within all of us, men and women, and the feminine is the receptive energy, the magnetism, then the manifestation becomes greater within ourselves. So if sex, and reproduction from sex creates life, imagine if we use it within ourselves or with another or in a group, that same energy to create, then that abundance is much greater. And I feel it, I've seen it in myself, in others, and work directly with it in some of the rituals that I've been part of.
Balancing both masculine and feminine within to create a richer, more fulfilled life, essentially.
Yeah. Totally.
So how do you connect with your masculine? Is that just deciding from once you've connected with your feminine, then it's more the logical, cerebral process of, right, okay, this is what I'm going to do, like the planning, the envisioning, or is it something completely different?
To me, I understand on a somatic level my right side to be like my masculine and my left side of the body to be like my feminine, and these alternate with the brain, just as if we're doing alternate nostril breath, it goes to the other side. And these are like the energy channels in the body, the Ida and the Pingala, in a yogic sense or tantric sense, whatever platform you want to use. So
same.
Exactly, the energy channels that run through the body. In a somatic sense, I listen. I used to have, because I used to lead with my masculine so much, I used to have quite a stiff right hip. And that was my masculine holding on so tight, So in that sense, we can listen to the body's wisdom, which has so much guidance for us. And then
I completely agree with that.
On another level, for me, that my own masculine and feminine, they have names, they're characters.
That's awesome.
And they change. Like my masculine's called Django.
Django, that's a cool name. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an old gypsy word meaning freedom.
Ah.
And my feminine is called Anya.
Oh, nice.
Fairy queen. My masculine is actually the flamboyant one. He's and he's calmed down. Since I've given him more attention, he's less outwardly looking for validation. He used to be the more flamboyant, he was the one that liked to wear like eyeliner and more sort of like look at me clothes, if you like, as a woman, which was really interesting to understand. My feminine is more ethereal, more fairy-like, likes to be in nature, prefers to just be naked with no makeup or anything, you know? And it's understanding these characters within ourselves, and we are multifaceted beings. And of course they change, you know? So like as we grow and adapt, and we so many of us look for relationships externally, again, it's that externalization, forgetting that the most important relationship we have is within, you know? And actually what I've come to learn over the years with my own journey, it's all reflective. Actually we're manifesting externally our own internal masculine and feminine, and want to take that in a less monogamous way. You can make love to these different aspects of yourself, which is a way of embracing and loving these parts. You know, one of the things, it's like, what do you love about your partner or your beloved? It's often a part of yourself that you haven't accepted.
Yeah, and you're projecting it outwards, and that's what you want to have more in your own energy field. I think
totally.
I really like that idea of anthropomorphizing these different aspects of ourselves, and it's very much like childhood regression, or when you go to the inner child and you see the inner child, which we all have, and again another aspect of our psyche, and always nurturing and supporting that aspect of ourselves, and being the father and the mother to that aspect. But to work with the masculine and the feminine like that, I've never thought of that, and I think that's a really interesting thing. And I guess you're having conversations with them, you're asking them how they are, you're seeing those two interact with each other, maybe making love with each other, I don't know, like different things, different ways, all just to connect to those internal energies, to nurture, to validate, to listen to them, and I guess then unify them. You as a unified expression of both of those energies can then be more aware of your needs, and you know what's, you know, and honoring those aspects of yourself.
Yeah, it's about becoming an integrated whole being, and in a masculine and feminine, and with both of those involving the light and the dark of the masculine and feminine, which is key. And it comes from setting them free, if you like.
Yes. Yeah. I like that idea. And I guess when we see the image of Ardhana Ishwara, half male, half Shiva Shakti God, it's the balance, not just the externalized concept of Shiva Shakti as the mother, father, God that creates all reality, but also balancing the Ida and Pingala, masculine and feminine within. So we can go from duality to unity, and then we're integrated, which is essentially what integration is, and we're in a more balanced position to then, as you said, to lead a more abundant, more emotionally fulfilling life once we've integrated. Of course, there's a lot of healing that goes on in that process, and in terms of healing, certainly looking at the mother-father relationship, the actual, you know, people that are our mothers and our fathers, and healing past wounds and traumas, is that something that you're actively working on, or do you not think that, do you feel that's not as important, and you're just kind of manifesting into the future? I mean, how significant do you feel it is to heal the past, and certainly heal the mother and father, because arguably they could then create the masculine and feminine within us. That's where we've learnt those energies from.
It's definitely a part of certainly my own practice and my own offerings, which I don't see as separate really. Where to start though? So I come from a embodied soul grounding, I would say. So as well as we might have the polarities of masculine and feminine, for me also it's very important to unify spirituality and sexuality, and to unify this idea of being human and animal, or the higher level of consciousness with base level of consciousness. And these are like deconstructing or collapsing the pillars that we create identity from. And I released the book, Embody Your Soul Purpose, which involves tantric numerology and Kundalini Yoga. And this is based on the idea that we incarnated, our souls chose to incarnate at a specific time with specific parents. And we're constantly calling in people and situations to support our soul's growth. We said at the beginning about the 2020 and having the vision, we're all here for a reason, and we have medicine for each other, you know, in one way or another. And so, of course, the lineages that we've chosen to incarnate within, and the parents that we've chosen to incarnate with, and the siblings and so on in the place, are so important to our growth. If we're coming at it from a wholly integrated, holistic place, then yes, we have to look at all these aspects. Otherwise, we're disregarding. So with my Sovereign Being Women's Tantra journey, we do this. You have to, in order to be expansive, which is ultimately the main aim of Tantra, to have an orgasmic life, if you like. In order to have an orgasm, the energy needs to expand, and that's how an orgasm happens, you know. And it's the same in our life. In order to have an orgasmic life, it's clearing out all the stuff, the baggage that we're carrying. And so within our very DNA, within our blood, we carry lineages of trauma. I'm Irish Catholic, you know.
Yeah, likewise, yeah. Just a few challenges there.
And our parents, you know, they represent our initial externalization of the masculine and feminine. It's how we learn. So I go right back, and with women especially, I work with the womb. So it's ancestral. It's what is there, and it's what our lives begin at, actually in our grandmother's womb, you know. And as an egg, our egg was in our grandmother, you know, like, and so I take people right back to the time of conception. What was the intention? And we've talked about, it's not what you're doing, it's why you're doing it. So if you're calling in a soul, why is it being called in? What was the purpose? You know, like, was it, as many people do, as a way of safety and security? Are you for another? Was it a form of rape? Is there fear there? You know, these leave an imprint in the soul that is called in to cleanse the karma for future lifetimes. And then beyond that, into the womb, into the 5th month of the womb, which is when the soul drops in. And I love the idea yogis talk about, when science and spirituality come together, I love. So about 120 days, they say that the soul, scientists say that the fingerprints come on the body.
Right, wow.
Time, yogis say, or we're taught that the soul enters the body, which is around the 5th month in the womb. And so it's like, I go right into what was going on. What is the fear impact? And if you come from a violent home, even in the womb, or if there was fear in the mother, that then gets carried through into your life. And your whole, and then the first 7 years of our, the type, when you're born, the type of experience you have at birth, at labor, the first 7 years are our main, like, base character. So our whole life, you know, we have a core wound, if you like, but then we spend our whole life often trying to fill externally.
Looking outwards to fill the void of the wounding that we've inherited often from our lineage and from our birth. And so what are some of the ways that we can start to heal the karma or the wounding that we receive from the lineage or from our parents? Like, what kind of work do you do, especially in the women's groups, or what do you encourage as sort of methods to start to reconcile those issues?
Again, it's awareness, it's watching. So it's like shadow hunting, you know, and
shadow hunting. Yeah, I like that. Hunt your shadow with awareness.
Yeah, and it has to be hunting. We talk about it in ISTA, which is another school, and work closely with the International School of Temple Arts. We talk about hunting, it's like if you go out hunting for an animal, you do it slowly. You know what I mean? You don't go racing in. You have to be like a bit cunning. See, you know, the predator and the prey doesn't want to be caught. Like, so it's like you have to be aware and watch. So if you're hunting for a deer, it's the same as hunting for a shadow in your life. Let's take an example. For instance, for me, one of my old Irish inherited traits from my father was to strive. You know, so it's like checking in, watching. And this is where meditation gives us space to watch, you know? So it's like, I get a few more requests, like, when are you doing the next course? It sounds amazing. I must respond, I must react to meet demand. You know what I mean? I'm done. It's like, where is this coming from? Is this coming from a place of truth and integrity? Or is this coming from a striving? You know what I mean? Like, do you really want that? Is that nourishing for me? And this we watch, you know, and it's having compassion, because we're going to slip up. You know, like these, like when we start to look at our own patterns, no matter, I mean, like, you know, take me, it's like 40 years of like building up these patterns of apparent protection. You know, it's going to take us a little while to slowly like catch them.
Yeah, it doesn't happen overnight, unfortunately.
No, exactly. So yeah, with cunning, with love, with patience, this is how we meet them, you know. Like,
that's beautiful. I really like that concept, idea, and it's that awareness, because it's so easy to fall back into those patterns. You may have caught them 100 times, but still, you know, it's that day-to-day awareness. And when you feel the triggering or the energy coming up in you, it's like, it's that program. And just having the awareness. Otherwise, we just get caught up in our unconscious programs, and we just kind of, I must do this, must do that, in that sense of having to, you know, from the program you've inherited from your father. Because I think a lot of the work that you do is working with women in women's groups and circles. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is at the moment.
What would you say when you talk about healing the feminine, women healing in general and healing the feminine, what would you say is kind of the biggest trauma, the biggest challenge, or the biggest wound for women from your experience that you've encountered with the work that you do?
Fear of feeling across, you know, and this isn't just for women, it's for men and women. In order to drop into the feminine is feeling, like we talked about, Shakti being the feminine principle, creativity, movement, energy, and what moves within us is emotion. And if you go back in his story, yeah, women were persecuted for feeling, like, and this is where we get into, this is where ancestral healing and the feminine comes through. Actually, as women in the womb, our monthly cycle, when we're feeling pain, we're being shown an opportunity, like to heal not only what's in ourselves at the moment, in that month, but also our ancestral pain, you know? So with every month, and not saying men don't have this opportunity, men actually have a different biorhythm, but also a womb energy to work with, like a cauldron, like a void energy, a portal, if you like. And so every month, women get this opportunity to feel the pain of the collective, of their lineages, cultures, personal. But because that was repressed so much, it was literally like hysteria. If you think about, if women have this ability to feel, especially women, men do too, but let's look at it from this perspective with the physical womb and the menstrual cycle. If women have this ability to feel, and there's this deep repression of the feminine going on, she within us is going to be screaming out. But if that is repressed, is controlled, then over time, that is literally the feminine has been beaten out of women, and therefore beaten out of men also. And so this ability to feel becomes difficult. And even then, if you look at children, you know, and emotional release, and we talk about the feminine being feeling, being emotions, what's moving within us, emotional release is so important, because if we don't move our feelings, then they get stuck and they get blocked. And this is where we create dis-ease within the body. So emotional release is so important. And if you look at animals and children, they do it naturally. But again, it's like literally, or in some cases, beaten out of them. Like, be quiet. Big girls don't cry. Like, get yourself up off the floor. What are you doing? You know, anger release. You watch my dog, if he feels a bit like, oh, that was a bit much, he'll shake and let it go. It literally, he vibrates the body and then he's on to the next. You know, and kids, when they're having a tantrum and they're literally like this on the floor, they're moving their energy bodies naturally, like our bodies know. But our society is, especially stiff upper lip in England, you know, don't express yourself. So we've been repressed. And so coming back to your question, because you can probably hear that I'm passionate and I can talk about all of this. Right?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
The feminine, the deep fear of the feminine within women and men. And I spoke about why I work with women, because if women find it difficult to drop into their feminine, imagine how men feel. And then slowly over time, as the bearer of children, we can be the change. But the deepest fear, the deepest wound, I would say, is fear to feel. Fear to really fully go into the feminine. And I talk about, I build it up, but I talk about learning to ride the dragon.
The dragon of emotions and feelings.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like
and expressing that.
Like, yeah.
Not feeling, I guess, getting in touch with your feelings and emotions, and then being able to be completely fearless in how you express how you're feeling. And that could be how you show up in the world, just moving, dancing, getting into creative states, which is an expression of the energy, the emotion within.
Yeah, I was having a conversation, and certainly in my courses recently with what's going on in the world, it's we talk about learning to respond, but it's also learning to utilize our power. And I wanted to talk into then what was coming up for me was this riding the dragon is really bringing together the unification of our own dark feminine and masculine. So to really, you know, to go into that black hole of creation is to go into the darkness, is to go into our deepest, darkest feelings, you know, which is difficult. And actually, in order to do it, we need the holding force of the masculine. Otherwise, we lose ourselves in it. And this is where we can look at the story of Kali and where she stuck out her tongue, which is one of my favorite stories, you know. So Kali was like, she'd been brought on, for those of people who don't know, she's like the dark feminine goddess in Hindu tradition. And she's like the slayer of demons. And she was called forth to slay all the demons. But she got so caught up in going into this, into the dark, into feeling, that she lost herself in it. You know, she couldn't stop. And I think this is what I'm talking about, is the fear, you know, and why it was attempted to be contained, because we feared it within ourselves. Ultimately, it's not putting the blame again externally. We're in a collective evolution, but we fear it, you know. So it's like, contain it. Oh bloody hell, what are we going to do with it? you know, like, so Kali was so like, wow, couldn't stop, that it needed Shiva to come along. And the story goes that he was called on, he came along, and Shiva is like the masculine principle, consciousness, the holding force, with a huge erect lingam, you know, wand of light, of penis, if you like obviously not physically, it's like a parable, but and he was like, Kali, let me hold you, or whatever. And she sat on him, and as she sat on him, her tongue stuck out. And this is where you get the image of Kali. You know, she's fully wild, but she's fully present. And this is where the dark masculine and the dark feminine come together, because it's in order to fully access and utilize your power, you have to go there. And then once you have a taste of it, once you've learned to ride the dragon, then you can be like a real warrior. You know what I mean? You're ready. And I use an image of a volcano. You know, you can feel that force within you, universal life force fully activated within you. And then instead of reacting, which is like a volcano that might just like a kid that might lash out, we can choose to fully bring it and melt and dissolve whatever is necessary in the world.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a great way of describing it. And I guess it's coming to terms with the shadow, embracing the shadow, like we're talking about the desires, but also the feminine power. I think that a lot of the suppression of the feminine energy globally, or women globally, is men are afraid of that creative power, because Shakti, of course, means power, and that Kali energy of the powerful embodied woman. I think, you know, men collectively, traditionally, have been afraid of that, and hence the need to suppress and control the feminine. And so it's healing the wounding within, and allowing men to connect also with their feminine energy. And so then there's this less of a fear of the female principle, and the feminine energy on the planet can start to really become more embodied and more powerful, and more openly and collectively expressed.
Yeah, it's coming back again to self-responsibility. You know, I don't blame men, actually. It's a collective evolution. And I feel like it's come from a fear of the feminine within both men and women, because to a certain degree, women have allowed, you know, and now we've come into a culture of absolute imbalance, where I see it as the dark masculine in the powers that be, and literally raping us, raping the planet, taking without management, if you like, the dark masculine in shadow, and the rest of us allowing, you know, like martyrs out of our power. And so the more we can come back into wholeness and integration within ourselves, and the more as a collective we can evolve.
You've done work with places like, I know you've gone to the Vatican. I remember talking to you last year. You've just been to Italy, and you work with the Mary Magdalene principle in the picture behind you. And so you describe yourself as a spiritual activist. And is that kind of the gist of the work that you're doing to help in this process of bringing women into a place where they feel more comfortable with their own energy, and it can heal and reconciliate all that energy within?
Can you repeat the question, please?
So in terms of, I know you you describe yourself as working with spiritual activism, and you've gone to places like Italy and the Vatican, and your part of your mission, you could say, is to help this healing of the feminine energy collectively, and working with women for that purpose.
Yeah. I talked about my book, Embody Your Soul Purpose, and I come from a very from a soul foundation. And my incarnation, it's through my healing, through my own healing, that I have evolved. And that is my journey. And the people that I work with, it's interesting in the world, there's a lot of discussion about inclusivity regarding equality. And for me, from a vibratory level, from a frequency, and I have, it's fascinating to watch. Yoga Bhajan talked about one of the Aquarian Sutras, one of the sort of sayings for this age, keep up and you'll be kept up. Like when I am doing my practice, or when I was holding classes, when I was doing my practice, my classes were more full. If I was not doing my own work, it was reflective in how many people I had come into the classes. And that also now relates to, I don't do so many classes anymore, but courses and one-to-ones. When I've gone through a journey of healing and got something more in myself, a person comes to learn from that because I'm vibrating that frequency. Like I said about having medicine for each other, we're constantly just calling each other in for different reasons. And it's like, there's a saying, isn't it? When the student is ready, the teacher appears. Like, so I come from my own healing, and I feel like the place I share from is my own experience. You know, I can't, very difficult to talk about. I can feel the collective. But in terms of the place with which I share from is from the heart. Like, just from a place of love. Love is my religion. Like, it's can we come to a place of greater love? And it sounds so like flowery, you know, but actually I'm not talking about love and light, which annoys me. It's like like wild love is one of the sayings used in ISTA. Fierce love that will say the truth, will actually, sometimes loving someone more is walking away. Like, you know,
that can only happen from self-love and self-integration and uniting those two principles.
Yeah. So the foundation I come from is love. And that, again, it like brings us back. We were talking about 2020 and vision, and this year being a 4, you know, which is the neutral mind, which is the balance of the masculine and feminine mind, which is, a responsive place of being, and also the heart. So my place is to unify the masculine and feminine, spirituality and sexuality. Just be that best person I can be, you know.
Absolutely. And you touched on, obviously, sexuality is a big part, or a part of Tantra, as embracing of life is what Tantra is all about in a sacred way. And so when we've integrated, or we've done a lot of self-healing, we've started to integrate the masculine and feminine within us. We're coming from a place of self-awareness and sovereignty and empowerment. Then we're often ready to meet a partner and experience sexual relationship. So coming from that place of integration and self-awareness, how may a tantric relationship or tantric sexuality, would that be different from maybe a normal relationship? Because obviously I think it's important to look at that relationship side of this process.
You know, like, you can have all the best practices in the world. I actually think relationships are the greatest spiritual teacher there is.
100%.
You know,
100%. We're so wise and healed, and then you meet someone and all your triggers, all your traumas are reflected back to you, and you just, it can be a great learning experience.
Yeah, you can build a white picket fence around you, and you can do all the meditation you like and transcend your body, and then you love. And oh my gosh. And it's because when we love, when we come into the heart, we're opening ourselves, and then we're our most vulnerable, you know, and then we fear, because then we're opening ourselves to the possibility we feel of being hurt. And so, yeah, there's all this protection that comes up and triggers, like you said. But in terms of a so-called tantric relationship and a normal relationship, I wouldn't look at it that way. Again, it's having the awareness. Like, my partner, he doesn't meditate. He's not a so-called, what is a spiritual being. He's an activist. He's like a warrior of you know, like a Knights Templar back in the day, protecting the feminine. Like, he's like, he lives off grid, and that's his way. And to me, that's no less tantric than somebody who practices Tanta every day or whatever, you know. The practice is not actually the exercises we do is not ultimately the practice. You know, the practice comes. Preparation. Yeah, exactly. The practice is everyday life. Is how we then
exactly.
Every exercise is about supporting us to be more aware of how we're being, and it helps when you have somebody who is able to communicate and go into what is there. And ultimately, it's about ourselves. So there are different ideas on this, like Yogi Bhajan used to talk about, it doesn't matter who you're with, you're just working through your childhood trauma.
And it's a little bit sad to think that relationships are basically a reflection of the things that you need to heal in yourself. You know, that's obviously there's the love and the passion and all the beautiful stuff as well, which is amazing. But at the same time, you say that relationships are kind of lessons. You're matching signature frequencies, or you're matching how sovereign and how authentic you both are, but also potentially the things that still need to be addressed and to be healed. And I guess if you have that awareness of the things within yourself, with the things within your partner, how those two are reflected in each other, it allows you to navigate that relationship so it's less challenging, traumatic, toxic, but it's coming more from a place of awareness, respect, love, and that can augment the potential healing that you can have from relationships and from sex, you know, making love, and because of course that can be a very powerful way to awaken the energies and connect with the feelings in the body, and to express the energy, to awaken Kundalini and all these things.
Yeah, and there are obviously tools and practices, you know, of tantric sex, energetic sex, and intimacy is not simply sex. You know, love is more than sex. It's a way through in some ways, and because I come from a place of embodiment, it's you know, it's an opening of ourselves and another layer. And again, that has to start with ourselves. You know, so like the more juiced up you are, the more juicy it's going to be meeting someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. So one way of putting it, definitely. Like, again, it's that reflection, isn't it? The relationship is the reflection of how integrated you are, and also what needs to be worked on. And I guess for your partner, he's living, you know, off grid, like the wild man. That's his authentic truth, and you know, he's living his truth, and you're living your truth, and you're able to come together from that authentic, empowered frequency. And then I'm sure there's other stuff, undercurrents of things that need to be addressed, like there is for everyone. But hopefully with the work that you've been doing, and with the awareness, and then you two sovereign beings can come together. And of course, the two individuals united are bigger than the individual parts. So that expression of love that you're sharing is ultimately empowering, and that you're growing together and you're helping each other heal, and you're mature enough to support the other person, to lift them up, as opposed to some relationships where it's the other way. It's two people trying to pull each other down.
Yeah, you know, many people are in codependent relationships, and it's just a method of keeping them safe within their own boundaries, I suppose. Yeah, they're not evolving. And real love wants the best for another person. Real love supports the other's growth. And it's challenging. For me personally, I've tried polyamory. I've tried same-sex relationships. Tried open relating, and actually for me at the moment, and that might change, and I think, you know, really when you awaken the divine child within you, it's like being constantly curious about life. It's not fixed, you know. At the moment, monogamy is what my heart desires. Is actually, for me, there's a great lesson in commitment and going through, and rather than kind of hopping. And that's where I'm at. And there's no judgment for anyone else, but I think it's, you know, in terms of relationships, people are starting to think outside the box. Times are changing for gender and relationships, and the way we relate in different ways. And yeah, whilst we're in this time of great change, it's also, change is good. Many people fear change, but yeah.
It's helping to break down those fixed beliefs and ideas and judgments. It has to be black or white. There can't be the grey and all the many shades of grey. And so we're breaking down those rigid beliefs. And I think that's one way you can understand Tantra, is the breaking down of those rigid beliefs and the expansion of consciousness, and then how that liberates and frees up the energy in the body, working with the body. I imagine you do a lot of dance, yoga and breathing in your women's groups to help connect to that energy and to help free that energy.
Yeah, and masturbation is a key meditation.
Could you say a little bit more about that process?
Yeah, touching ourselves, really touching ourselves, and seeing where we may be in shame or fear or guilt. You know, watching where our mind goes when we're opening the body, when we're opening to pleasure. Are we in fantasy, externalization again? Do we feel guilt for touching ourselves? Do we think it's wrong in some way? The body is naturally wired to pleasure. You know, all life, that's sexual energy, is life force energy. It's how all life is created. Now we've been conditioned to see it as wrong in some way, as a way to control ourselves. Because a person who is liberated in their sexuality is more free. So yeah, I specifically use the womb gates journey, which is kind of like the chakras on a feminine embodied path. Nobody really ultimately knows where it came from. It's said to have been practiced by the priestesses of Isis. But it's a way of opening the body and seeing where we're blocked. So we go through every new moon. I hold a women's temple, and we go through the womb gates, and it's opening the body from the yoni, from the labia, through the sacred spot, the clitoris, the cervix, into the womb, into the heart, into the higher heart. And it's like opening the body as a temple And each of these gates have a key. And it's unlocking those keys in energetic sense is like trust, devotion, gratitude, longing, surrender, ecstasy. So yeah, it's opening the body. It's like the meditation, instead of going to a church to pray or a temple, pray at our bodies. Our bodies are, and this is really the feminine path, you know, to so much spirituality and religion is about ascending, is like transcending the body. But actually the feminine path is descending into matter, onto the earth.
That's awesome. Embracing the body, embracing sexuality. There's so much power in sexual energy, and arguably that is the Kundalini force in the body that's awakening and moving and activating the chakras and helping to remove the shame and the programming that we've inherited from religions, from society and culture. I think that's a really important gift and part of tantric practice, to help to free up those fears and the shame and the guilt around sexuality.
Yeah, totally. And this is where we move out of shadow and out of control dynamics, because it's our energy, and that whether we're, you know, how we're using our masculine energy is like penetrating, how we're choosing to penetrate the world, whether with our thoughts or with our cock. You know, it's the same place we're coming from. And if we feel disempowered, we're going to use it in a different way. It's going to go into shadow. How we receive or how we manipulate to get what we want. I love the work of Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent in that understanding those energy dynamics.
What was that? Say that again, Roisin. Sorry, I can hear the rain. And it's, what did Betty Martin say?
I love the work of Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent in understanding these energy dynamics.
Right. Okay, I'll check that out. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, really enjoyed this conversation. Are there any sort of last words you'd like to share before we conclude? Anything you think maybe we've missed in the conversation that you'd like to express, or do you feel we've kind of covered everything that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I had no expectation, no goal. It was, I was flattered to be invited, and it's an opportunity to share what I'm very passionate about. And I guess I would just finalize by saying, you know, don't fear feeling, because it's your power that you fear. Yeah,
fearing our power. I think that's, for a lot of us, subconsciously an obstacle that we are seeking to overcome. And again, a lot of that is to do with emotions and sexuality, and embracing all of those and integrating all those different parts of us, which I think is a big part of Tantra. So thank you so much, Roisin. How can people get in contact with you?
The best way is social media, Roisin Kiernan. I guess you could write that down instead of me spelling it or people trying to remember my Irish name.
Yeah, it'll be on the video, so people will be able to. So you're on Facebook and any other platforms?
Yeah, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube.
Fantastic, brilliant, excellent. Well, thank you so much, and I look forward to looking at some of the other work that you're doing, and maybe having another conversation at a later time.
Wonderful, James. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.